Don Bradman was the greatest cricketer ever to put boots on and to walk onto a cricket ground.
And I would play for ages merely hitting a golf ball, which I would throw against a brick tank stand, try to hit it on the rebound with a stump. And for fielding, I would throw it against the rounded rail of a paling fence, and depending on the accuracy of the throw, the ball would either come back fast and low or wide and high for a catch. But all of these things were done purely for pleasure and to fill in time, with no thought whatever that they might represent training for something more serious in the years ahead.
The Don, his was the quickness of feet, his reflexes, his eye. He could play shots, you know, he was unnatural.
Bradman's pull, his favourite stroke, as he will tell you, is one of those glorious feats of skill for which you wait in delighted anticipation and exult to witness.
You can't tell the youngsters today the attraction of this fellow. I mean, business used to stop in the town when Bradman was playing and likely to go in. All the offices closed, the shops closed. Everybody went up to the cricket ground to see a great batsman, and he was a great batsman.
Don scored a century in the Melbourne Test against England on the MCC Tour in 1928-29. Now he's scored centuries in England, at Nottingham, Leeds, Lords and the Oval, missing only Manchester.
At the Oval Test match in 1930, when I was captain, when the wicket was very lively after some rain, Don Bradman showed signs of disliking the short ball intensely and tended to keep away from Lava, who was running very fast. One got the general impression that the bowling could be a bit too quick for Bradman.
Well, the first thing I knew about Harold Larwood was we went to the same school at Nunkagate. And of course there was the famous recreation ground at Nunkagate where we all started. My father saw him playing on the recreation ground, brought him down here. And of course it became history. And I remember my father saying when he came down that Harold in those days was very slim and very pale through working down the mines. And the committee said to my father, "What have you got us, Joe?" And he said, "A fast bowler." They laughed, but they didn't laugh long, because he was really fast. He was quick.
And I was a coal miner on the Monday. I went in Liberty on the Tuesday, and I was a professional cricketer on the Wednesday at 32 shillings a week. And that was in 1925, my first match for Notts. And halfway through the season in 1926, I'm playing against Australia.
People don't realise today how fast Larwood was. I was fielded out third man, and there were times when I couldn't see the ball. So it gives you some idea. His tremendous pace, he had the most beautiful run-up and most lovely action and timing. I've never seen anything better.
Silence for Mr. D.R. Jardine.
Plum Warner was chairman of selectors in 1932. He and the fellow selectors made Jardine captain.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have just this to say about a game which I think is a peculiarly English heritage. A definition of cricket which has always struck me as being the only worthy definition of cricket. It was described as this by a New Zealander when he said it was that beautiful, beautiful game that is battle and service and sport and art.
A lot of people felt when Douglas Jardine was appointed that he was an absolutely implacable man. feared that there might be trouble because he hadn't got on well with the Australians when he had gone with Percy Chapman's side in 28-9, and he didn't like them much, and they didn't like him much. And Rockley Wilson, who had been to Australia just before as a member of the MCC side, who was his coach and master at Winchester, spoke with a rather strange way of fingering his tie. And he said, well, he said, on hearing that he was to be captain, he said, we shall win the Ashes, but we may lose a Dominion.
There was a famous dinner, wasn't there, before that tour at the Piccadilly Hotel. That would be between your Notts captain, Arthur Carr, your England captain, Douglas Jardine, yourself and Bill Vose.
Jardine, he was asking my old skipper, Mr. Carr, how many overs and how to get the best out of us and one thing or another. And I think he was on about attacking this leg stump, and could I do it, because he asked me if I could, if I was accurate enough to do this and persist in it. So I said, well, I'll give it a go.
Now you see the position of the leg theory. The field is actually placed on the leg side as the ordinary bowler bowling the off theory would have his field on the off side.
The bowler's aim is to make the batsman play the ball into the net of fieldsmen clustered on his leg side, who are eagerly awaiting the chance of a catch. Of course, if the batsman is slow, he stands the risk of being hit by the rising ball, as you see now.
Going to Australia, I found later that Jardine had had many conversations about bowling leg theory. They wanted to know whether his fast bowlers could bowl accurately enough to bowl this leg theory type bowling.
First whistle has just gone. We've had a wonderful send-off at St. Pancras and all the way down the line. And when we get to Australia, we shan't forget the good wishes of those who've been kind enough to come and see us off. And we hope that he will do as they hope we will do and return with the Ashes.
And here's England. So spring to it, Kangaroos.
We played at Adelaide against South Australia. I bowled a short one, and Vic Richardson pulled it for 4. So I turned to Jardine and I said, Skipper, can I have another man on the leg side? He says, no. So I thought, well, this is funny. So I bowled another bouncer deliberately again, and Vic Richardson hit it for 4. I said, Skipper, can I have another man on the leg side? He said, no. Well, I've never been used to this, so I bowled another one. He again, he probably hit it for 6. I said, can I have a man on the leg side? He says, no. So that was the end of the over. The next over I started, and again I gave Vic Richardson another 4. I said, can I have a man on the leg side? He says, no. He says, but you can have another 4. I said, I don't want another 4, I just want 1. So you can't have one. Well, I bowled some more bouncers, and Jardine, in despair, I suppose, took me off. And I was cross, Jardine was cross, I think. And he said, I want to have a word with you. So I said, no, I want to have a word with you too, Skipper. So he said, we'll go back to the hotel together. And he said to me, he told me then that I'd got to do as I was told if I was going to play under him. I said, Skipper, I'll do as I'm told if I know what you're trying to do. So when I ask you for a man and you say, I can't have one, I said, oh, I've never played under that sort of captaincy before. So he says, if you don't, he says, I shall send you back to England. I said, well, I'll go back tomorrow. He said, do you mean that? I said, I do. Well, you know, he stopped in the main street of Adelaide. He stopped, he says, shake hands on that. That's the sort of talk I like. And then he told me about his ideas of leg theory and how to bowl to a general field placing of 4 men on one side of the wicket and 5 on the other, what we call a 4-5 field placing. That was impossible on these lovely pitches in Australia where when the batsman once got in and was seeing the ball well, they got the base of the pitch and the bounce. And you had to limit them to playing most of their shots on one side of the wicket or most of them on the other. And he would like us to bowl to a 7-2 field if we could. With the bowler and the wicketkeeper, there was the 11 men, you see. If he couldn't, well, all right, a 6-3, but nothing worse than a 6-3 when we were bowling either off theory or leg theory. And so I said, well, fine. And when I knew what he wanted to do, everything fell into its place.
Bradman told us England was going to use 4 fast bowlers during the tour, and they were going to use the scone theory. In other words, they were going to aim high. I don't mean in an ambitious way, I mean in a physical way. High at the shoulders and the scone. There were 6 men close in on the leg side. The silly short leg could almost have pilfered something from your hip pocket as you shaped up to the bowler. And they went right round to stand right beside the keeper, who was Les Ames. And if you tried to play the ball defensively, the fellow with silly leg had a tremendous chance of catching you as it dropped off the bat. And if you tried to glance it, it was like having 6 slip fieldsmen round for a leg slip catch. Then if you said, oh, well, this is no good to me, I'll have a whack at it. I'll hit it out and I'll score out in the fence. There were 2 men, one just behind square leg and one just in front of deep fine leg. And if you hit the ball, hooked it, you had to hit it clean over the fence for 6. And not too many men that I know have ever been absolutely certain when they hooked it they were going to put it right over the fence.
I didn't think they played it very intelligently, because it's not the bouncer that's dangerous, because if you know a ball's going to bounce, you can let it go. You can let it go over your left shoulder. Just leave it and let it go. The dangerous one is the one that's just short of the length, and you don't know where it's going to arrive about that height. If it arrives that height, you might be bowled out if you let it go. Or this height. You find yourself playing up here, defending yourself with an array of short legs here ready to pick the ball off the bat.
Captain tackled me. Said he wanted me to bowl a few more bouncers to a stronger leg side field. And I said, but Douglas, I've never bowled that way, and I don't think it's the way the game should be played. And we had a rather heated argument, and he went on saying, well, you've got to. And I said, well, I'm not going to. And if you don't like the way I bowl, you better leave me out. But if you do, I can only tell you that when I get home, I shall let it be known what's taking place today.
Gubby, I don't think, ever felt that he was in complete control of his direction. You see, if you're bowling with leg slips or short legs and you bowl one badly out of line, you're endangering somebody's life. You know, I mean, if the batsman hits one really nastily. And anyway, Gubby, for some reason, whether that was it, I don't know, but he never felt very happy bowling this leg theory.
Of course, I couldn't have bowled it as well as Harold Larwood, because Harold Larwood was a magnificent bowler and immensely accurate. But I could have bowled it.
It was in November of 1932 when I was selected to play for an Australian 11 against the visiting English side on the Melbourne cricket ground. I was selected to open up with Woodfull.
I was left in charge, actually, and I moved the field for the slips one by one over to the leg side when the ball got old, because the ball wasn't leaving the bat, and they tended to play the ball on the onside. So I suppose I was first to set that concentrated leg side field.
In walked the champion, Don Bradman. Well, immediately Larwood seemed to increase his pace, and I've never seen faster bowling. It seemed though it upset Don.
He was so quick on his feet. He could play Bill, he could play Bill Bowes, he could play Gubby Allen, all right, with an ordinary set field. But I left my offside field open for him. I'd only 2 men on the offside. And I used to watch his feet. And if he backed back, I used to follow him a little bit. So sometimes if he'd have run into the wicket, it might have been that much down the leg side. But It was only to stop him, but we thought we'd carry on with it. We'd got him on the run.
It was perfectly obvious that Bradman didn't like it, and I understand that he complained to the Board of Control about that field setting after that match. And I think from then on, the setting of the field and the short pitched attack evolved.
Bradman had some sort of a row with the Australian selectors, so he didn't play in the first Test match.
Sydney Cricket Ground, where all Australia seems to have foregathered to watch the first stage of the struggle for the Ashes. England come out to field, having lost the toss, and Woodfull and Ponsford open the innings for Australia. Vose bowls his leg theories to the disapproval of pavilion critics, if not of the whole subcontinent. Larwood sends down his expresses faster than ever, and none of the Australians find the way to deal with them, until Stan McCabe comes in for fourth wicket when 3 wickets have fallen for 82.
My best friend, Stan McCabe, was then about 127 not out. He came out to point to meet me on my very slow walk to the wicket. He said, "Stand right up to him, Tiger. He won't bounce one at you because he'll only be wasting energy." And that sounded pretty good to me. I thought that's exactly the way I'd have looked at it too. I wouldn't have bowled one at number 10 or 11. So I stood up for the first one. I saw the little fella. We used to refer to him, Larwood, as the little fella. We also referred to Don Bradman as the little fella. He came from the grey-blue distance. By the time he got up to me, I thought, God, he must be going on his holidays. And when he let fly, I felt the ball hit the middle of the bat before I was absolutely certain it left his hand. So I just looked down the wicket at Stan McCabe and shook my head. And he nodded and said, "Righto, mate."
And O'Reilly bowled Vose for 4.
Well, the Australian press, they went to town on this leg theory type bowling, and then a very clever, marvellous, full marks him, christened it Bodyline. It was a wonderful expression for it. It told the spectators everything they wanted to know.
I was picked in the second test, and much to my surprise, because I'd missed the first test, it was quite obvious what my job was to be. I was to more or less pave the way for Don to continue on as he normally would.
I was fielding at deep fine leg. The crowd are always inclined to back. Sometimes they're very rude. Occasionally they are humorous. Said to me, "Wait till our Don comes in. Wait till our Don comes in." Every time I went down to the deep fine leg, they said to me, "Wait till our Don comes in." And our Don did come in fairly soon.
And as soon as he came down the pavilion steps, they gave him the most wonderful ovation the whole way to the wicket, which roughly takes a minute and a half, seems a long time. Seems even longer if you've got naught when you're walking back too, I might add. And as soon as he arrived at the wicket and took guard, then there's complete silence just for a second. And then when he's looking round to preparing for the first ball to come, the crowd all start yelling and shouting again.
Waiting for the cheering and the applause, everything to die down, I said to my mid-on, "I'll go up short for the first ball or two." So my mid-on went up short. When it was silent again, Bradman took his guard and I started to move in second time. And again, this cheering and everything broke out. Bradman turned away, I saw to my... And I said to my fine leg, "For something to do, for nothing else, you see. Come around square a bit more." And he moved around. And I saw Bradman look at this short leg. I saw him look at that. And I knew that Bradman expected a bouncer. And I thought, well, I wonder if I gave him all the impressions of a bouncer and didn't bowl one, what would happen? And for no other reason, I went and instead of digging it, I bowled it short of length, and instead of digging it in to make it bounce, I just let it go in a normal way. Well, Bradman turned. Had it been a bouncer, it would have been going yet. But I would have hit it out of the ground, I think. But as it was, it didn't bounce as high as he thought, and he was in this position for the pull. He turned round, hit down at it. He just got the faintest edge. I don't think he deflected the ball of an inch, a couple of inches, and it bowled him out. Played on, if you like. I can remember the stunned silence of that huge crowd. And it was Jardine. He was a short leg. And Jardine had his arms above his head. He was like an Indian doing a war dance, you know. He was dancing round and round and round. You know, Bradman was out for a duck. And there was this deadly silence in this great crowd until Bradman walked off.
So I went back and there was absolute silence amongst that particular part of the crowd. I didn't say anything until about another 3 wickets had gone down. Then I said to them, I said, by the way, I said, when's your Don coming in, you see?
In the second innings, he played probably one of the great innings that we've ever seen against the Bodyline attack.
Who is it that all Australia raves about? Who has won our very highest praise? Now is it Amy Johnson or little Mickey Mouse? No, it's just a country lad who's bringing down the house, and he's our Don Bradman. Now I ask you, is he any good? Our Don Bradman, as a batsman he can surely on the wood. Or when he goes into bat, he knocks every record flat, for there isn't anything he cannot do. Our Don Bradman, every Aussie dips his lid to you.
It was a tightly packed ground that saw England take the field for Australia's first innings at Adelaide after having put 341 runs on the board themselves. Fingleton partners Woodfull to the wicket, who opens the...
I remember that day very, very clearly. I was only a young lad, I was 12, but I was a very keen cricket follower. We knew there was a great fast bowler from the previous matches. The first impression and the main impression was that you just could not see the ball. Those fast bowlers like that, you would normally be able to follow the ball down the pitch. With Larwood, it was just so fast you couldn't see it.
There is an early shock for Australia when Woodfull was unfortunately struck on the heart by a ball from Larwood which got up.
I hit Billy Woodfull under the heart, and he was crouching. If he'd have stood erect, he wouldn't have hit him, he'd only hit him probably top of his thigh, but he was crouched.
It was the last ball of Larwood, a second double, but he's bowling to the ordinary field. Then Larwood came back with the new ball again, and immediately Jardine, before the first ball was bowled, he switched the field over to the leg side. Well, that's when the American commenced in earnest.
The objection was he was bowling orthodox field at the time, and as soon as he hit Woodfull, he swung to the leg side field, and that's what riled the crowd. A batsman's got a bat, he's got pads, he's got gloves on, you've got a ball. He hits you for four, everybody claps and cheers and says, what a mug you are. If you hit him, there be. I mean, it's part of a fast bowler's trade to give them a few in the ribs occasionally, to keep them honest.
I've seen people get it worse than that and just give it a slight rub and carried on. But he made such a fuss about it, being the captain.
And with Woodfull out, after pluckily continuing his innings, 4 wickets are down for 51.
And I went into the room to see how Bill was. Now, reports had that he was laying on the table, waiting for the doctor to arrive. Well, that's all hogwash, actually, because when I walked in, Bill had just walked out from under the shower, and I said, how are you? Oh, he said, Leo, he said, that's dreadful things, I don't know. He said, what's come over the game? And just then, in walked Mr. Warner, the co-manager of the English side, and Mr. Warner said, we just called in Mr. Woodfull to see how you are. And Bill, he said, Mr. Warner, he said, there's two teams out on that field. And he said, one is playing cricket and the other is not. He said, that's all I have to say. They just turned on heel and walked out. Then on top of that, Bert Oldfield was struck on the temple.
The English players are very distressed when Oldfield is struck on the head, Larwood again being the unlucky bowler.
The ball was slower off the wicket than he had anticipated, and it hit him on the wrong side of the head. He looked too early. Now, Bert and I were friends, always have been friends, and I ran down the wicket and I said, I'm sorry, Bert. He says, not your fault, Harold. And then he collapsed unconscious.
Bill Woodfull went out to the ground. He came back with Bertie, and I passed him on the way down. The whole of the Adelaide ground was in an uproar.
But one's got to bear in mind that the two batsmen who were badly hit were not hit when Bodyline was being bowled. And it's an extraordinary fact of that, but it is a fact. Bill was hit by one that lifted a bit, the uneven bounce again, Bill Woodfull, and Bertie Oldfield went hooking. He actually got a top edge and knocked it up onto his head. But the packed leg side field was not being employed.
The Australian innings closes for 222 runs, 119 behind England's total. And England eventually win one of the most sensational cricket matches ever played by 338 runs.
Well, I was waiting by the gate, as most young boys did in those days, to see the players come out of the exit gate. They then walked across the ground to catch their transport. There was no sort of team bus then. Jardine and Allen came out. Jardine came out through the gate first, of course. Gubby Allen waited back. He was half pace behind him, let him come through the gate. As he came through, I said, "Will I carry a bag, Mr. Jardine?" He looked at me. Well, he looked through me, made no attempt to speak to me at all, looked away, and Gubby Allen, who was, say, the half step behind, looked down, smiled, and handed me his bag. So I walked across in all my glory across the field with the two great English cricketers.
But the game became famous, and probably will be famous forevermore, because it was from Adelaide that those famous cables started to flow.
In that cable was used the word unsportsmanlike.
That was accompanied by other words about it destroying the relations between the team and so on. And that really struck England like a bombshell, because it was sent in a rather unfortunate manner, because the Cricket Board of Control sent it by ordinary cable rate, whereas the Reuters man sent his at the urgent press rate. It got to England in 3 minutes or something. The MCC was alerted by Fleet Street before they'd even received the official cable, and Lord Hailsham, the chairman of the MCC, was dug out of bed at 2 in the morning and told that the English are unsporting. So you can just imagine what a shock he would have got at the time.
I always remembered Douglas saying to me, "Have you seen the cable?" And I said, "Yes, I have, and I think it's dreadful." He said, "I know they'll let me down at Lord's." I said, "No, Douglas, you're wrong. No one can call an Englishman unsporting and get away with it. They've lost the battle with the first shot they fired." I could see the smile that came over his face. He first of all said he didn't believe, and then a smile came over his face, but he thought perhaps I'd made a good point.
They cabled back saying that they were words to the effect that they were, deeply concerned and distressed at this attitude, and offering to call off the tour if they wished. It developed to the extent that the Australian Prime Minister became involved. There's evidence to show that he telephoned the British Prime Minister at the time, Ramsay MacDonald, all the Australian government representatives in England, British government representatives out here, they were all involved. The English team manager, Plum Warner, was trying to get the issue played down. He went to the British rep here, and I think that he in turn went to the Australian Prime Minister, and he was concerned because if there had been a breakdown in diplomatic relations between the two countries, conversion loans which England had made to Australia to help them in their economy during the Depression would have been affected, and I think he was trying to prevent that from happening. But certainly the Governor of South Australia, for instance, he was in contact with the Dominion Secretary. There's a lot of hot activity going on. It's a very delicate matter.
MCC demand withdrawal of unsportsmanlike.
The row got so great, you see, on this tour, the fired imagination of the spectators, everybody liked, that Jardine called a meeting of the players and said, well, now then, you see what's happening if we persist in this. What do you think? Do we still continue with leg theory bowling and off theory bowling, or do we scrap it? And the whole team, apart perhaps from Gubby Allen, who I don't think voted either way, but I don't know, I've forgotten about that. But the whole team supported Jardine and says, no, Skipper, we carry on.
No, that's not true. The team meeting arose in a very peculiar way. An article appeared in some paper in Adelaide that Morris Tate had thrown a glass of beer over the captain, and they went on to say that dissension and unhappiness and disagreement within the side. And we had a team meeting. We did not discuss Bodyline at all. It was merely, would people sign an agreement? I think it's been published, I don't know, I haven't read the things for ages, supporting the captain. And there was no mention of Bodyline in the statement whatsoever.
Now this new kind of cricket takes courage to stick it. There's bruises and fractures galore. After kissing their wives and ensuring their lives, batsmen fearfully walk out to score. With a prayer and a curse, they prepare for the hearse. Undertakers look on with broad grins. Oh, they'd be a lot calmer in Ned Kelly's armour when Larwood the Wrecker begins.
Then we went up to Brisbane for the fourth test. We were leading 2-1, and I could always talk to my skipper. And this particular night before the test, I said, what's the team tomorrow, Skipper? Any alteration? He casually replied, he says, there might not be a test yet, Harold. Oh, I says, good. You know, thinking about myself. So he said, no, so I've got to sit here. I said, I don't know how long, waiting for a cable.
Australian Border Control replies, sportsmanship not questioned.
Sydney is a long way from Brisbane, and keen as the Aussie is on his cricket, not many Sydneyites can make the 610-mile journey up to Queensland to see the deciding test. So in the New South Wales city, the streets and parks are thronged today with crowds gazing upwards at scoreboards. The scoreboard is a replica of that at Brisbane, and the crowds are just as demonstrative. So when Badman was out, bowled Larwood, the groan could be heard all over Sydney.
And if the crowds were disappointed to see Australia routed, it did not hinder the expression of their natural exuberance according to the best sporting traditions.
They brought in Alexander in the last test, I think with a view to bowling bounces at us. But he was never accurate enough. He was pretty quick. He was fast, but he wasn't an accurate enough bowler to bowl it with success. I remember him in the second innings, he bowled what was supposed to be Bodyline at us and ran down the middle of the wicket a bit. Douglas complained about him running on the wicket. That made him more angry, and he bowled a bit quicker.
I hadn't bowled 2 balls and he's had to go and crook at the umpire, keep him off the wicket, you know, at me straight away. But I had to admire him. In my book, he had to put it in his blunt words. He had a ton of guts. I give him the works over in Sydney, even without the leg field, and I hit him a few times and he never flinched, you know. I hit him in the hand, there was blood running down his fingers and he never flinched. Then I dropped him like a light, got him in the groin. But you had to admire him for that, you know, he had a ton of it, what it took. And he was pretty ruthless and he was just determined to win the Ashes, and that was it.
I wanted 3 or 4 wickets to beat Morris Tate's record. So I got the first wicket down, and I must have been exerting myself a bit more because I broke a bone in my foot. Well, it wasn't actually broke, it's something that's all there, all squeezed up. And I fell down and I got up, and he said to me, he says, you'll you'll have to finish the over, Harold. I said, I can't, skipper. He said, you'll have to. I said, look, I can't walk or run about. He said, well, you have to finish the over. So I said, right, well, I said to the skipper, I said, right, I can go then now, can't you? He says, no. I said, can't go up? He says, no. I said, look, skipper, I said, I can't run, I can't hardly walk. He says, well, you've got to stop. It's a good cover point. Now, that, as you know, it's the worst position on the field. Where, I mean, you're running left, you're running right. So I said, I can't run after him. He said, all right, let somebody else run after him, and off he went. So I had to go to cover point. But Jardine told me afterwards, he said, I couldn't let you go off, Harold. He said, the psychological effect on Bradley, so I didn't want Don to know the seriousness of your injury. And that was the last ball I ever bowled in Australia. So I had to have operation when I got back home.
Who would have predicted that England would win 4 out of the 5 tests? Who would have given Bradman an average of only 56 runs an innings? But this series of tests will be remembered as Larwood's.
I feel that I'm here under rather false pretenses. No. Because in order that I should have the very proud privilege of addressing you and presenting this very tangible mark of your honor to Harold and Bill.
All the bands were out. Thousands of people to see them come to Nottingham. Oh, they were local heroes. Well, English heroes, because Larwood and Bowes had, they won the series practically on their own bat.
I want to say something about our skipper, Mr. Jardine. Whom we are so delighted to have with us on this occasion. But I found it very difficult to express in words what I feel. He is certainly one of the finest men I have ever met and have had the privilege of meeting. A magnificent captain, a great sportsman, and a true friend. Let me again express my very sincerest thanks to all concerned for the kindness you have shown me. Thank you very much.
You'd got back to England, Harold. You were asked by a certain gentleman to apologise for your bowling in Australia. Who was that? Can you tell me?
It was Sir Julian Carr. He was the president of our club. He said, Lord, he says, I've got a letter here for you, so I want you to read it and think about it. He said, if you'll apologise to the MCC and to Australia, the probability will be you can go to Australia again next time. I said, I'm afraid I won't sign it, sir. He said, well, read the letter. So I read the letter. And I said, you want me to sign this? I said, yes. I said, well, sorry, I'm going to refuse. He said, will you show it your father and mother? Let them read it. And let me know tomorrow. So I said, yeah, I'll do that, but I know what they'll say. So I took it to my father and mother. Now, you can picture those, Fred, after when I was out here, all the palaver that was going on, what a state of mind they'd be in, wouldn't you? I mean, yes. Thinking about me. So I showed my mother, and she put her old glasses down at the tip of her nose, and she says, are you going to sign this? I said, why, should I? She said, if you do, you'll never see me alive again. Said that they'd felt it that much, you see, so I said, no, Mother, I'm not going to sign it, and I didn't. I wouldn't. And I said I wouldn't play against the Australians again.
When the Orion recently berthed at Sydney, she brought a famous English cricketer back to Australia, Harold Larwood. With his wife and 5 daughters, he plans to settle in the country that once booed him whenever he bowled. He certainly had a wonderful action, hadn't he?
I've no regrets at all, Fred. I think I made the best decision I've made in my life when we came out here too. Everybody's settled down. We still love England. Still got it, always talking about England. And
yes.
The heart's still there, but this is where my family is now. And
do you wish you had ever apologised?
No. No, nothing to apologise. Did you used to apologise to anybody when you hit them on the leg or anything?
No.